I wanted to talk a little bit about passive disrespect and how big of a lever it can be in our relationships. And I was thinking about this the other day, being out on the road, traveling around with my boss, and we're friends. I've talked about this before. We have worked together for years. We are friends and co-workers. And yet the reality is it doesn't matter that we are friends. He still outranks me. He's still a person who is ultimately responsible for me getting a paycheck, right? So I think, there's definitely a difference in our perspectives on life. We come at life from different places. We're in, different income bands. There's just a lot of differences in our lives. But anyways, we're traveling around together and we're going to do different things. And, on the surface, it's a really convenient experience, right? Like what is a day in the life? Well, I'm not doing anything extremely strenuous or extremely hard. It's a pretty simple job. It's mostly just kind of a go shake hands and kiss babies and visit different facilities and, do a few simple things I can do to maybe be of service. It's mostly just the life of being an administrative assistant to a low-level executive. And if I was going to say my life is hard, that would be a complete lie. It's not hard. It's not hard at all. And yet, this past week, I thought to myself that I didn't have a very good time, And we went somewhere. We went to a few different places, and then he's like, let's go hiking. Let's go hiking up, some nearby trails. I was like, yeah, sure, sounds good. And we're eating out at restaurants and we're going places and we're, when we're not engaged in business, we're, hiking around places and just kind of, doing things around the towns where we are. And it's not really exactly work related. It's just kind of, in a way, just sort of hanging out. But then I think to myself, even though the activities are fun, like this is not really an experience that I exactly wanted to have, I mean, it's like, it's kind of demeaning in a way. Even though the experience is completely positive, it's not respectful of my time. It's not respectful of the fact that, if I did have other things I wanted to do or places I wanted to be or anything like that, I mean, my life is completely on hold because, I'm traveling. So does it really matter if I'm not working long hours, but I'm still not at home? I'm still not really at liberty to do the things that I want to do, even in town, like, sure, it's not like I have anything I need to be doing, but, I'm with somebody who pretty much just is going to be like, yep, get in the car or here's the next place we're going to go. And I don't really have any choice in the matter other than just get in. So, we're going to go to a work site maybe, or maybe it's going to just be something that he thinks is fun. We're going to go hike up a hill. And I'm going to love every moment of it because I guess that's kind of, what I'm paid to do, to be along for the ride. But if I was going to do a role reversal and told him, like, here's how it's going to be, if I feel like hiking up a hill, I'm going to just tell you to get in the car and then we're going to go hike up the hill. you know, I don't know that he would really like that a whole heck of a lot, right? It's kind of one of those things where like it could also be the same thing in a relationship too, right? Like it's not that you're abusing anybody. It's not that you're treating somebody bad or making them suffer in some way. It's just, are you really thinking about the fact that the other person in whatever relationship it is, they care about how they spend their time, even if they're not doing anything important. We all have things that maybe we would like to do or something, and when you try to sort of manipulate people, or maybe you don't have friends, and so you kind of purchase friendship because you can't. Like, that's the kind of stuff where I think it's easy to do things that are not harmful on the surface, and they might even be positive on the surface, but are they really being attentive to the interests of someone else? It could be so much better to to say, hey, do you want to go do this thing, and genuinely say it from a perspective where if the other person didn't want to, you would be completely fine with it. But it's also really easy to just kind of assume that someone else is going to want to do something, and it's like, oh, we're going to go on a family vacation, and you're going to go on the family vacation. You're going to love it because I'm telling you, you're going to love it. Okay, well, I mean, I guess so. Maybe. But it doesn't feel fun because I didn't come up with it. I didn't choose to want to give consent to spending hours and hours, hanging out with my boss, right? Like, I just came along for the ride and went with it because that's what he said he wanted to do. And I'm not trying to make waves or cause trouble or make an issue out of it, but it's not like I really wanted to do that, right? And it's not like I was really given much choice in the matter, Like, these are the kinds of things, it kind of just eats at you when someone just assumes that, you don't have anything that you need to be doing. Well, it's true. I really don't. I got the time. But, from his perspective, we're just, just friends. But the reality is I'm his assistant, so I don't have any choice, really. I'm just kind of along for the ride. Or, it could be that way in any sort of scenario where you have different people working together, or you have people in a relationship that are, telling people what they're going to do and stuff. And it can wind up being a thing where one person thinks it's all just fun and games and it's a positive thing, and the other person thinks, this kind of sucks because now you're just kind of imposing on me, and you're not even really giving me the opportunity to opt in or opt out. You're just kind of treating me like I'm some sort of property. And then, I would look at that and I would think, well, maybe that kind of sucks, but then, I'm paid pretty good to make that be the breaking point, and I think, well, I mean, I can afford to, go on a hike somewhere or hang out with somebody who maybe I don't agree with on everything or whatever. Like, if that's what I have to do for my job, then it is what it is. It's not a big deal. I can do it, But I'm sure from his perspective, he thinks that we're, we're really close and it's great and it's all just, amazing. But, it's never actually super fun when you live your life kind of in the shadow of somebody else who's going to dictate what you do or don't do and kind of treat you like they're, in charge of your destiny. And I think that it's kind of a power trip sort of a thing for a lot of people too. I think it happens a lot in situations where you have people of different ranks working closely together for a long period of time. They feel like they have some sort of a kind of a sense of ownership in the other person. And it also happens a lot in relationships where people maybe have spent a long time in some kind of a committed relationship. Either way, though, I think it's really important to be respectful of how other people feel, and not necessarily just assume that because you like something, everyone else in your party likes it too, or because someone says yes and is willing to do something that you've asked them to do, that they actually want to do that just because they didn't say no. It's important to read the room and actually have a true, genuine spirit of service, and not treat people like they're a commodity, or treat people like they're obligated to kind of be there at your at your call to just do whatever you tell them to do. And I think it's also a lot worse, like in a workplace environment. It's worse when you're dealing with roles that are salaried, because there's not really any, there is no clocking in or clocking out, or saying, these are the contract hours, or this is the time when, you can ask me to do something, but you can't ask me to do it if I'm not on the clock. It all just kind of, it blends together in a sort of an uncomfortable way, which then creates a situation where work and play are blended, and people are like, hey, you should go to this luncheon or this dinner or this special thing that we're doing in the community, or whatever it is, and it's just another volunteer thing that we're going to go do. And everyone's supposed to be all excited, let's go do the thing because of course we love it. And, doesn't matter if you've already worked 80 hours that week, you're still supposed to go to the volunteer thing and be excited and happy to give your time because, you're salaried and that's what you signed up for, or whatever. It's just a lot of shenanigans that start to happen. And it winds up being a lot of soft manipulation where people are focused on looking good, or they're focused on, getting people to do things, and they don't realize when they are pushing people's buttons, or if they do, they just don't care. Like there's a lot of that where people just don't even care. They don't care if they're disingenuous to someone, because it's really not their problem. They're just doing their thing, and everyone else has to kind of fall in line one way or the other. And I think that that's something that I've thought sometimes it might be nicer just to have a job where you work your scheduled hours. You don't pretend you're going to suck up to anybody. You just go do your job, and then when you're done, you clock out and you go home, and that's it, And if somebody wants you to do something, they have to pay you to do it. And there isn't any of this, you're going to have an easy job, but you're going to have to, brown nose somebody for an extra 8 hours because, we're on some kind of a corporate road trip, and that's how it works, that kind of stuff. But the lesson is just be willing to observe the needs, the interests, the care, and show a sense of care for others. Don't be a person who can't read the room. Focus on not asking a question when you already know the answer. And it's like if I step on your foot and then I say, are you okay with it? Is that fine? Do you mind? And you're like, yeah, I mean, it's fine, because you don't want to make a deal out of it. It's not the end of the world. But does that mean that you liked having your foot stepped on, and then I step on your foot again later on, keep stomping on your foot. I keep on saying, sorry about that. Is that all right? And you just keep on saying, yeah, sure. It's fine. No big deal. But at some point you're like, you know what? I'm tired of having my foot stomped on. Maybe you don't say anything, but you still think it. Like you're like, this kind of kind of sucks a little bit, but you don't want to say anything. And that's kind of how it is. Like, we should be attentive to care about how other people feel, and make a point to be attentive to that. Don't just say, oh, well, somebody said they're fine with it, so I guess they're fine with it. Well, no, maybe they just said they're fine with it because they're putting up with you. And if you actually cared, you would be thoughtful of that, and you would know how to, read the nuance of what they're trying to say, and, then you would know that maybe they aren't fine with it. They're just trying to be nice, and then you would be sensitive to their feelings. And those are the kinds of things we always want to be sensitive to other people, and think about, how does this make a person feel? Not just, are they willing to go along with it? Are they willing to, tolerate what I'm asking of them, or whatever it is? We should really truly say, like, do they actually, do the things we do actually uplift other people, or do they just kind of, I guess, uplift ourselves? And, we convince ourselves that everything is great because we don't really want to face the reality that sometimes the things we're doing actually get on the nerves of other people. Agree swiftly with your adversary while you are in the way with him, it has been said. So I do subscribe to that. If you are on the receiving end of something that feels a little bit less than what you would want or hope for, sometimes it's important to suck up your pride and say, not every battle needs to be fought. It's okay to sometimes just swallow your pride and let things be what they are. But if you are in a position where you can maybe make a difference in someone's day or someone's life, always ask yourself, what is it like to be in the shoes of that person? If I did a role reversal and we traded places, would what I'm doing be respectful of that person's time and boundaries and things like that? And if the answer is no, I'm not sure it would be, then probably don't do it. Rethink your posture, rethink the way you say things, and don't ask questions when you already expect a specific kind of an answer. If you're going to ask a question, then make a point to ask a question genuinely, and don't expect people to do what you want them to do just because you have the leverage to kind of compel them to fall in line. Like, sometimes when you say, hey, do you have time? And someone says, yeah, sure, I have time. Well, do they really have time, or are they just saying sure because they have to be respectful of the office that you represent? There was a saying that someone said, I'm always going to drink coffee in a styrofoam cup, because even if I'm a high-ranking person, the reality is people will respect me because they respect the rank, not because they respect me. So I need to remember that even if I represent a high office and a high rank, I'm still going to drink my coffee out of a styrofoam cup, because I need to remind myself that the people who respect me are not respecting me. They're respecting the office that I represent. And that's important sometimes, because people will respect you. You think that they're respecting you, but really they're respecting the role you are in. They're not really respecting you. They might act like they're your friends, but really they're not your friends. They are respecting the office that you represent if you are in a position of leverage or authority. And a lot of times people will pretend to be your friends. They'll pretend to be interested in what you're interested in, and they will play along when you want them to play a game, because that's their job, to support you and whatever it is that you want, and whatever your will and pleasure is. But that does not mean that they are on board with wanting to to be invested in you as an individual. And when you make the mistake of thinking that people's interest in you as a leader is the same as their interest in you as a friend or as a person, then you can wind up, buying friendships because you don't have any real friendships, using leverage to get people to do what you want, because those people would never actually do that if you weren't there using your power of pull to get them to do something they would otherwise not do. You want to be the person who, if you got rid of all of the jobs and the roles and everything, that, people would want to go spend time with you then. Not that they want to spend time with you when you're on a work trip and you have a captive audience, but rather that you're the kind of a person where, if nobody was getting paid anything, that you could still spend hours sitting there on the porch having a good time talking about life or whatever. And the reality is there's not a lot of that. Usually when we form relationships at work, it's oftentimes because we're just trying to make our way and advance our careers or whatever it might be. It's not about a genuine connection, and I think that is important to be very aware of, and maybe if possible try to put yourself in a role where you don't have as much of that office politics going on, because sometimes the office politics can be a bit exhausting in its own way. Like there's hard work where you work really hard, and then there's hard work where you had to be political all week, and they both kind of take something out of you emotionally in a way. So I do think sometimes it's better to be tired from strenuous work than it is to be tired from things that are just spiritually draining and take up a lot of your time. In any case, as always, try to be happy. Good luck on your adventure. Till next time. Thanks so much for watching.